Snow drifted across the Montana plains in long, whispering sheets, carried by a wind that felt ancient and restless. Christmas Eve had always been quiet out here, but this year the silence felt different, expectant, almost trembling, as though the land itself knew someone's life was about to change. Samuel Hart stood on the wooden platform of Cliffside Station, boots planted firm, his gloved hands shoved into his coat pockets. The lamplight flickered against his square jaw and wind-chapped cheeks, making him look harsher than he felt inside. In truth, his heart was thudding harder than it had in years. Maybe since his wife died. Maybe since he'd stopped believing. Christmas miracles were meant for men like him. He heard the train before he saw it, a long, distant rumble rolling across the frozen fields. The rails vibrated beneath his boots as the engine burst into view, headlamp glowing like a star fallen too close to earth. Steam billowed, hissing and swirling, turning the station into a dreamlike haze. Samuel straightened, pulse kicking as the train slowed with a tortured screech. Passengers began to spill onto the platform, stamping their feet against the cold, pulling scarves tighter, murmuring greetings. He scanned each face automatically, though he doubted he'd recognize her. He'd only ever seen her handwriting, neat, slanted, full of apology and hope. Ilara Quinn, 24, alone, pregnant, and arriving to marry a man she had never met. Then he saw her. She stepped down from the last carriage as though the world might crumble under her feet. A blue wool coat wrapped her frame, dusted with snowflakes that sparkled under the lanterns. One hand gripped a scuffed brown suitcase, the other pressed lightly against the swell of her belly, a gentle protective curve that peeked from beneath her coat. Her gaze moved slowly over the crowd, searching, hesitant. When their eyes met, she froze. Samuel's breath tangled in his throat. She was smaller than he expected, softer too, with a quietness that tugged something deep in him. But her eyes, those wide hazel eyes, were full of fear, worn-out bravery, and a shadow of heartbreak he recognized as if he'd lived it himself. She approached in slow, careful steps. "Mr. Hart?" she asked, voice trembling like frostbitten glass. "Samuel," he said, clearing his throat. "You must be Ilara." She nodded, but her lashes fluttered nervously. For a long moment she said nothing, her breath misting the air between them. Then her fingers whitened around her suitcase. "I wasn't sure you'd still want me to come," she whispered. "After the last letter I sent." Samuel stepped closer, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel that he wasn't turning away. "I told you," he said softly. "You and the child would be welcome here." Her eyes filled so fast she blinked in surprise, as though she hadn't expected tears to still come. "I didn't think anyone would want me," she murmured. "Not like this. Not carrying someone else's—" She broke off, swallowing hard, as though the words burned. Samuel shook his head. "A child isn't something to apologize for." Her lips parted, a breathless sound escaping. Half disbelief, half relief. But then doubt returned, carving worry into her features. "You don't know the whole story," she said. "People back home said, well, things about me. They said I'd made poor choices. That I'd seduced him. That I should have known better. When he died, it only got worse. Everyone looked at me like I'd brought shame on the whole town." Samuel clenched his jaw until it ached. Cruelty disguised as morality. He'd seen enough of it to last a lifetime. "You deserve better than what they gave you," he said firmly. Her shoulders sagged, trembling with exhaustion. He realized then how thin she was beneath that coat, how carefully she stood, as though bracing for disappointment. "Can I carry your bag?" he asked gently. Ilara hesitated, not because she didn't want help, but because no one had helped her in far too long. Finally, she nodded and offered the suitcase. When their fingers brushed, she stiffened slightly, but not with fear, more with unfamiliarity. Human kindness felt strange on her skin. As he took the suitcase, a cold gust slammed into them. Ilara shivered violently, hugging her coat around her belly. "Wagons this way," Samuel said. I put blankets on the seat. She followed him across the snowy platform, boots slipping slightly on the ice. Samuel slowed, matching his pace to hers without making it obvious. When they reached the wagon, he turned to help her up. "Careful now." She placed her palm in his hand, her fingers delicate but trembling with effort. Samuel steadied her as she climbed, making sure she settled safely on the padded seat. When she adjusted the blanket over her belly, she winced faintly. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded weakly. "It's just, the baby's been restless today. I think they know we're traveling." He smiled a little. Strong kid. At that, Alara looked at him sharply, expectantly, almost fearfully. You don't talk about the baby like it's a burden, she said softly. It's not. Even though it's not yours? He met her gaze, unflinching. Doesn't matter whose blood a child carries. Matters who raises them. Something in her cracked then. Not loudly, not visibly, but he felt it. The moment she allowed a sliver of trust to enter the space between them. She looked away quickly, blinking fast. Snow dotted her lashes, melting slowly. Thank you, she whispered. He climbed into the wagon beside her and flicked the reins. The horses started forward, hooves crunching through fresh snow. The town faded behind them, swallowed by darkness and drifting flakes. For a while they rode in silence. Alara kept one hand over her stomach, the other gripping the blanket. Samuel kept his eyes on the road, giving her space to breathe, to absorb, to settle. At last her voice rose, timidly. Samuel? If you ever regret this decision, taking us in, you don't have to pretend. He turned his head, meeting her uncertain eyes fully. Alara, he said quietly, I don't take people into my life unless I mean to keep them there. Her breath caught, a soft, shaky sound, part relief, part ache. She looked forward again, watching the snow swirl through the lantern glow. And though the night was cold, Samuel watched her slowly lower her shoulders. As though for the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying her fear alone, timidly. The ranch house glowed like a warm ember in the sweeping dark, its windows shimmering gold against the white world around it. As the wagon rolled into the yard, the horses snorted, eager for shelter, their breath clouds drifting into the night. Snow-covered fences lined the drive, each post crowned with a white cap, and strings of pine garland framed the porch as though the house itself had been dressed for the holiday. Samuel slowed the horses. Alara stared ahead, chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. She had imagined dozens of possible homes on the long journey west, a shack, a dark cabin, a cold place where she might linger awkwardly in a stranger's presence, but she had not imagined warmth or light, or the faint curl of chimney smoke that smelled, faintly of pine resin and roasted apples. The barn door slid open and a lanky teen stepped out, brushing hay from his sleeves. His stride was quick but lazy at the same time, the gait of someone raised on open land. When his eyes settled on Alara in the wagon, he stopped mid-step. Samuel hopped down from the seat. Evening, Noah. The boy lifted the lantern higher. You brought her? Alara froze, instinctively curling her arms around her stomach. She had grown used to the moment people noticed. The widening eyes, the awkward silence, the judgment that always followed. But Noah's face shifted differently. Curiosity softened into something gentler, something almost protective. Ma'am, he said, dipping his head politely. Samuel turned back to her. Let's get you inside. You're cold. He offered his hands. Alara accepted, letting him steady her as she climbed down from the wagon with slow, cautious steps. Every movement reminded her of the long journey, the aches in her lower back, the heaviness pulling her forward. Noah stepped closer, holding the lantern out so she could see where to place her feet. Got the fire going big, he said proudly. House is warm. She managed a soft smile. Thank you, dear. The front door opened with a groan, and heat wrapped around her like an embrace the moment she stepped inside. The smell of simmering stew and wood smoke filled her lungs. She paused, overcome for a moment by the simple comfort of it. This, she whispered, this is beautiful. Samuel shrugged, embarrassed. Just tried to make it welcoming. She traced the room with her gaze, handmade quilts draped across the sofa, a pine wreath resting on the mantel, stockings hung neatly by the fire. 3 of them. She blinked, her breath hitching. You decorated for Christmas. Didn't want the house to feel empty when you arrived, he admitted. Alara clutched the edge of her coat, the emotion rising too quickly to hide. She turned her face toward the fire, letting the warmth ease the tightness in her throat. Samuel nodded for Noah to add another log. Flames leaped higher, casting dancing gold across the room. Sit, Samuel said gently. Here, near the hearth. You need heat after that gold. Alara settled onto the cushioned chair he guided her to, easing herself down slowly. The fire's glow reached her immediately, warming her chilled cheeks and stiff fingers. Her baby rolled inside her, nudging under her ribs. They're active tonight, she murmured, pressing her palm lightly to her belly. Samuel crouched beside her, watching her hand. May I? She blinked, startled. No man had ever asked gently. They'd only stared or judged. Yes, she said softly. He placed his hand over hers. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a small bump tapped against his palm, quick, definite. Samuel's eyes widened, a soft breath escaping him. Well, look at that. Feisty little thing. Ilara laughed, a tiny, fragile laugh she hadn't heard from herself in months. They never stay still for long. That's good, Samuel said. Means they're strong. The way he said it, without hesitation, without bitterness, sent warmth through her chest far deeper than the fire could reach. Noah reappeared with blankets folded neatly over his arms. Uncle Sam, I'll get the guest room ready. Samuel stood. Make sure the windows shut tight. We don't want any drafts. Ilara's eyes widened. A whole room? I only need a corner. No one sleeps in corners here, Samuel said. You'll have a proper bed. You'll rest well for the first time in too long. Her throat tightened. She turned her face away. Samuel moved to the kitchen. She heard him ladle something into a bowl, the gentle clink of spoon against pottery. When he returned, he handed her a steaming bowl of stew. Careful. It's hot. The smell alone made her eyes sting. She hadn't eaten a hot meal since the second day of her journey. Tears blurred her vision as she took the first bite. Warm, earthy, comforting. I'm sorry, she whispered, wiping quickly at her eyes. I don't mean to cry. You don't have to apologize, Samuel said softly. When she finished eating, she rested the bowl in her lap and exhaled a long, trembling breath. Her eyelids grew heavy. The fire crackled rhythmically, a lullaby she had never known she needed. Samuel noticed. You're exhausted. Noah's got your room ready. Ilara pushed herself up slowly, one hand bracing her lower back. Samuel stepped in immediately, offering his arm. This time she didn't hesitate. She leaned on him gently as he guided her down the short hallway. The room was small but cozy, lit by a single oil lamp. A quilt of deep greens and reds lay across the bed, and someone, likely Samuel, had placed a vase of winter berries on the nightstand. Ilara pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed again. It's too much, she murmured. More than I deserve. Samuel shook his head. It's exactly what you deserve. She turned toward him. The light caught the tired lines around her eyes, the softness of her cheek, the tremble in her lips. Samuel, she whispered, voice cracking. Thank you. For this. For everything. You're welcome, he said gently. Both of you. Her breath hitched. He stepped back toward the door. Rest now. We'll talk more in the morning. Before he could leave, she asked quietly, Why are you being so kind to me? Samuel paused, hand on the doorframe. Because everyone deserves a safe place, he said. Especially at Christmas. Especially you. And then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Ilara stood for a moment, her hand over her heart, letting the quiet surround her. For the first time since her life had fallen apart, she felt safe. She rested a hand on her belly. We're home, she whispered. The baby kicked as if agreeing. And outside, snow continued to fall, gentle and silent, as if blessing the beginning of something new.